The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting golden stripes across the wooden floor. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air, mingling with a faint hint of vanilla from the pastries on display. She sat alone at the corner table, hands wrapped around a warm mug, feeling the heat seep into her fingers. A man entered, tall, with a presence that drew the attention of the few patrons. His eyes scanned the room before settling on her. A shiver ran down her spine, though she could not say why. His smile was polite but carried an edge that made her stomach tighten. The hum of conversation and the clatter of cups seemed to fade. She became aware of every sound, the drip of espresso, the scrape of a chair, the soft rustle of newspapers. Her pulse quickened. He moved toward her, slow and deliberate, each step echoing in the small space between them. When he stopped at her table, she noticed a faint smell of cologne, sharp and unfamiliar, and her chest constricted. His hand rested lightly on the chair across from her, not sitting, yet claiming space. She felt trapped, both curious and alarmed. Suddenly, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. It was soft, yet carried a weight that made her heart pound. Words she could not understand, phrases that felt both intimate and threatening, rolled off his tongue. The warmth of the coffee could not soothe the chill creeping along her spine. A barista passed by, offering a polite smile, oblivious to the tension at the corner. The man's eyes met hers again, sharp and unwavering, and a bead of sweat formed at her temple. Every instinct screamed caution. The room seemed smaller, the sunlight harsher, the shadows longer. Her fingers trembled over the edge of the mug, her breath shallow. The clinking of a spoon in a cup sounded deafening. He shifted his weight, and in that motion, a subtle but unmistakable threat lingered. She realized she had underestimated the quiet danger that now sat mere inches from her. He straightened slightly, yet the intensity in his gaze did not waver. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, each inhale sharp, each exhale fragile. The hum of the coffee machine suddenly seemed deafening, like a pulse in the quiet air. His hand moved, subtle, brushing against the edge of her table. A tremor ran through her body. The warmth of the coffee suddenly felt distant, replaced by a cold prickling at the back of her neck. Every fiber of her being screamed that something was wrong. She tried to speak, her lips stiff, words catching before they formed. Her eyes flicked to the door, then to the other patrons, but the world seemed distorted. Shapes and sounds blurred into an oppressive haze. The rich aroma of coffee now mingled with something acrid, a hint of something metallic that made her stomach twist. The man leaned closer, and she caught a glint in his eyes that was not warmth. Fear prickled along her spine, sharp and immediate. He spoke again, each syllable deliberate, each pause weighted with intent. Her hands tightened around the mug, knuckles whitening. Suddenly, he reached across the table, fingers hovering over hers. The contact was electric, a shock that froze her entirely. Her mind raced, heart hammering as the small coffee shop felt impossibly confined. The chatter of other patrons seemed unreal, distant, as if she were trapped in a bubble with him alone. A cup rattled on a nearby table, breaking the spell for a moment. She realized the man's face was impossibly close, his gaze fixed, unwavering. A cold sweat slicked her back as her senses sharpened to every detail, the faint scent of his cologne, the rigid line of his jaw, the unyielding intensity in his eyes. Her instinct screamed escape, yet her body remained rooted. Then he whispered a single word, soft and deliberate, that made her blood run cold. In that instant, she understood that nothing in this coffee shop would ever feel safe in the same way again. Her fingers shook violently, barely able to hold the mug. The word lingered in her mind, its weight dragging her heart into icy panic. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the sunlight now harsh, glaring, almost accusing. He leaned closer still, his face inches from hers, and the warmth she had felt from the coffee moments ago vanished entirely. Every nerve in her body screamed for flight, yet her lips remained frozen. She could feel his breath, steady and deliberate, brushing across her cheek. The metallic scent intensified, sharp, suffocating, mingling with the bitter coffee aroma. Her stomach twisted, a knot of fear tightening as if something invisible pressed against her chest. She realized she was trapped, cornered, every exit blocked by the weight of his presence. Then his hand landed lightly on hers, and the shock was immediate, like fire through her veins. Her pulse threatened to explode, and every sound, the clatter of spoons, the low murmur of patrons, suddenly sounded distant, as though the world had shrunk around them. He smiled, a small, controlled smile, yet it sent a shiver racing down her spine. Her mind raced, desperate for a plan, any escape. Her eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, but the cafe felt impossibly small, suffocating. A sudden movement at the counter, the barista dropping a cup, snapped attention for a heartbeat. She realized that momentary distraction could be her only chance. Her hand tensed, ready to pull away, ready to run, but he noticed. His gaze hardened, an unspoken command that froze her again. Then, in a whisper that barely carried, he said something that chilled her to the bone. The words were gentle, almost intimate, yet beneath them lurked a menace she could not ignore. Her vision blurred, heart hammering, and the coffee shop, the cozy, sunlit place she had always loved, transformed into a cage. Every instinct screamed danger. Every sense screamed escape. She could not move, could not speak. And in that unbearable, suffocating moment, she realized that nothing would ever be ordinary again. Her breath caught, shallow and rapid. The gentle intimacy of his words clashed violently with the sharp, icy fear crawling up her spine. Every fiber of her body screamed, but her hands remained pinned against the mug, trembling uncontrollably. He tilted his head slightly, studying her as if weighing her reaction. The sunlight streaking through the windows glinted off his eyes, making them seem sharper, colder, impossible to escape. She became aware of the space around them, the soft clink of cups, the distant hum of conversation, but it no longer existed. Everything had shrunk to the tight, suffocating bubble between them. Suddenly, his hand tightened slightly over hers, firm but not crushing, sending an electric jolt through her. Her pulse surged, her stomach twisting into knots. The metallic scent grew stronger, mingling with the sharp tang of fear. Her thoughts raced, each one more frantic than the last. She tried to pull away, but his gaze held her like iron. Every instinct screamed flight, yet her body betrayed her, frozen under the weight of his presence. The coffee shop, once a haven, now felt like a trap, walls closing in with every second. He leaned closer, and the whisper came again, soft, deliberate, but carrying an unmistakable menace. Her mind screamed comprehension before her lips could form words. She understood, finally, the danger that had been creeping beneath the surface, masked by polite smiles and soft coffee aromas. The room seemed to constrict further, the chatter of patrons fading completely. Only the sound of her own pounding heart filled her ears. And then, in the very instant she thought she could not feel more exposed, his hand slid just enough to brush her wrist, sending a shiver of shock so intense she gasped aloud, drawing the attention of the nearest table. He smiled again, calm, controlled, terrifying in his precision. The warmth she had felt in the coffee, in the sunlit morning, was gone. She realized with a cold, sinking clarity that this encounter was no longer about conversation, no longer about attraction. It was about control, about power, and about a secret she had not yet glimpsed. Her mind spun, searching desperately for a way out, but the space between them was a cage. She felt the air thicken, her pulse thundering in her ears, and knew that one wrong move could tip everything into chaos. Then he whispered her name, soft, intimate, precise, and the full weight of what was coming hit her. Fear and shock collided in her chest, and she understood in that single moment that nothing in her life would ever feel safe in the same way again. Her body tensed, every muscle coiled like a spring. The whisper of her name lingered, soft, intimate, yet carrying a weight that made her entire chest ache. The air around them seemed to thicken, pressing in, suffocating. He leaned closer, his gaze unrelenting, and she could feel the heat of his presence against her skin. The metallic tang in the air sharpened, making her stomach turn. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, knuckles white against the mug, yet she could not move. Then his fingers brushed hers again, slow, deliberate, like a spark igniting every nerve. Her mind screamed, telling her to pull away, to run, yet her body refused. The sound of the coffee machine, the chatter of other patrons, the clatter of cups, all faded into a distorted, distant hum. Nothing existed except him, and the terrifying immediacy of the moment. He whispered again, words she could not yet understand, but their meaning hit her like ice water. Shock paralyzed her, her heart hammering violently against her ribs. The cafe, once warm and familiar, transformed into a place of suspense, every shadow stretching longer, every sound sharper. She felt trapped, the space between them impossibly small, impossibly tight. His eyes bore into hers, calm yet threatening, and a shiver ran from her neck to her toes. Every instinct screamed danger, yet she was caught, unable to escape, unable to speak. Then, unexpectedly, he moved back slightly, still close enough to hold her attention, and smiled with unsettling calm. The tension did not break, it deepened. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend the intentions behind the polite smile and measured words. The mug in her hands shook violently, spilling a drop of coffee onto the table. She realized, with a sudden, icy clarity, that the man had been testing her, watching her every reaction, and the full reality of her vulnerability crashed into her chest. Her pulse surged, adrenaline flooding her system. Every sense heightened, the faint creak of floorboards, the scent of coffee, the metallic tang in the air, the warmth of his presence pressing against hers. In that moment, she understood that the shock she felt was only the beginning. The next move would define everything. She knew instinctively that there was no going back, and the calm, polished exterior of the man across from her masked something far more dangerous than she could yet see. Her chest heaved, heart still hammering as he finally eased back, breaking the invisible hold he had over her. The tension lingered like a heavy fog, but for the first time, she could breathe. The metallic scent faded, replaced by the comforting aroma of coffee and pastries. He studied her quietly, then nodded almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging some unspoken truth. There was no more threat, no more games. Only a strange, lingering connection that left her pulse quick but steady. The cafe returned to normal, the hum of conversation, the clatter of cups, the sunlight warming the wooden floor. Yet, everything had shifted. She realized that her fear, sharp and immediate, had been tempered by curiosity, and that human hearts were capable of both shock and awe, sometimes in the same instant. He smiled gently this time, genuine, and took a step back fully, giving her space. She returned the smile cautiously, aware that the encounter would stay with her, etched into memory like a photograph of a single intense morning. She lifted her mug to her lips, savoring the warmth. Outside, life continued, unrushed, bright, ordinary. Yet inside, she carried the extraordinary pulse of what had just happened, a reminder that even in ordinary places, moments could shock, stir, and awaken a deeper feeling of connection. The man moved toward the door, pausing for a moment. Their eyes met once more. She nodded faintly. He returned the gesture, then stepped into the sunlight, leaving the cafe quiet, serene, yet changed forever. She exhaled slowly, feeling a soft thrill mixed with relief. Love, danger, and wonder had mingled in a single breath, leaving her with the unmistakable knowledge that life could surprise her in the most unexpected ways. She sipped her coffee, letting the warmth spread through her, and for the first time that morning, smiled without fear.